Hello and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide Chamber of Commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms. I'm the president and CEO of OBI and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. A quick disclaimer off the start, it is now spring in Oregon, which means it's allergy season, and I am a little stuffier than normal as a result of that, so apologies to everyone. But let's get to it. Today, I am talking with Dave Larecy, chairman and CEO of Con-Vey in Roseburg. Con-Vey makes things that other businesses use to, well, make things. In fact, to manufacture products that all of us use. Con-Vey produces material handling systems. So think, for example, production lines in plywood plants. And it is fascinating. It's an important company and a sophisticated company. We had a chance to visit and tour Con-Vey as part of our most recent Manufacturing and Innovation Roadshow. It was a great visit, and we wanted even more people to learn about the company, its history, and its commitment to Douglas County, Oregon. So Dave, thank you for joining us today to talk more about the company.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Angela.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, Con-Vey is a company that most people probably haven't heard of, but it plays a really important role in the production of things like housing and critical infrastructure and everyday products. Before we get into some of that, just talk broadly about what the company does and how it's evolved during its, I think, 80 years now in operation.
Right, correct. Yeah. 80 years in Little Roseburg, Oregon. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
So, yeah, Con-Vey has got a long history of manufacturing automated equipment. So when we say automated equipment, it's very computerized. It's very high speed in most cases. And we're building or manufacturing the equipment that makes plywood and OSB and LVL. If you're into the building products world, you know what all those acronyms mean, but basically the structural products for building a house, or the MDF and particle board that is used for furniture and aftermarket, like secondary wood products, furniture and that type of thing. So we make the machines that make the building products.
It's really interesting because, I was so struck when I was at the facility about just that, like the steps that go in to something like a house you're sitting in or a sofa you're sitting on that we take for granted as the end consumer. We maybe think about the final assembly or construction, but often we don't think all the way back to the equipment that goes into the final assembly and the folks assembling that. And right. It was just so striking, and I think it's a really good reminder of how these supply chains come together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If you like that show, How It's Made,
yeah,
where you always see these things that you're like, oh, I never had any idea that they did that. When you come to our facility and you see the engineering that goes into it, the 3D modeling, all the parts being designed prior to it going out to the manufacturing shop and being, the steel burnt and the parts manufactured on CNC lathes and milling machines, and then it all being put together and tested in quite large pieces, as you saw. It's a huge facility with a lot of large equipment, and when you see all that, it's really kind of fun to watch that whole process go from a concept to a mill that's running somewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's and then that's another piece of it that actually struck me on the tour, was because we walked through the office, so we could see the designers and the engineers that you have, and then the construction of this big equipment, but then you got to disassemble and move it. So we'll come back to that, but it's this whole through line that I think a lot of people don't think about. So let's talk a little bit more about history and then coming up to today. So Con-Vey grew up in Roseburg, in part because it was, near the heart of the timber industry in the West, and there were a lot of mills in the region, and all of them needed production lines. So this all makes some sense.
Right.
How have shifts, though, recently in the timber products industry affected the company?
Yeah, it's interesting because we started in Roseburg, basically three gentlemen after the war in 1946, because of the the housing boom, the mills were going strong. And so they started this small company to support those local mills. And, Roseburg or Douglas County is considered the timber capital of the world and still is. And so they built their business around servicing those lumber mills and plywood mills that were local. Within 10 miles, there was probably 20 or 25 mills back then, where today there's, 4. So big change. So, back then in the early 60s, 70s, 80s even, most of our business was in the Pacific Northwest. There was a little bit in the South, a little bit in Canada, but primarily it was Pacific Northwest. And that's really shifted in recent years, obviously, because of the federal timbers not being cut as much in Oregon and Washington, not being able to do industrial businesses like our customers do in California. It just doesn't make sense. So most of our business is really in the South and the Southeast. Still some in Canada. And it goes in spurts. So, for instance, oriented strand board or OSB, we don't make oriented strand board in the Pacific Northwest. Our trees are too good and valuable for that. Oriented strand board is typically made out of fast-growing trees like southern yellow pine or some poplars, and they're not really good wood for anything else. You can't you can make lumber out of southern yellow pine, but you can't really do like plywood.
Yeah.
So in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of our business is in plywood or LVL, which is laminated veneer lumber, big beams that are made similar to plywood, but large scale, kind of mass timber type things. And so we still do a lot of that locally. When I say local, I mean in Oregon and Washington. But it's like maybe 10% or 20% of our business most years. Recently, in the last year and a half, and especially right now, we're doing a ton of work in Pacific Northwest, but that's very rare for us. So it's a great blessing to have local customers that are privately owned that are investing in the timber industry, and they're good friends of ours, and we love doing work near home and not have to travel to Alabama or South Carolina or Texas.
Yeah, well, I hope that sustains for all sorts of reasons, so that is good to hear. The name Con-Vey, which I know this is an audio podcast, but listeners, it's CON-VEY. But that obviously evokes a conveyor belt, play on words there. And that's sort of accurate, I guess, because you build material handling systems that move things from one place to another. But it's really completely inadequate given the sophistication of the systems that you and your team build. Can you talk a little bit for folks about some of the new technologies, including robotics, that you have now incorporated into the systems that you're building and selling?
Yeah, it's actually, you're right. We started out building conveyors, like a lot of it where we had some patented what we call totally enclosed tube belt conveyors in the 60s. And that was for moving sawdust, and we moved grains and garbage and all kinds of projects all over the world. And that's kind of where they got a big burst of growth in the early 70s. And so that's where the name kind of comes from. But those were just basic conveyors. And nowadays we don't make any basic conveyors. Everything's highly automated. And the reality of it is the wood products industry today, the parts are either too big and heavy to be able to handle them without some automation on a conveyor, or they're moving too fast to be able to handle them without automation. So we use a lot of servo-controlled motors and drives. You can think of those just like a Tesla controller in a car, where it's managing the torque and the horsepower, and we're programming that all in of how fast we want to run, where we want to stop. Same as like your high-speed elevator in a tall building. But then we're using like lasers to measure distance or to sense where the product is. We're using ultrasonic sensors or sound waves to position product. So there's a lot of automation. Everything's obviously computer systems driven, what we call PLCs. And we have a full staff of electrical controls engineers that basically design these systems. We build UL panel shop, like your hairdryer has a UL sticker. We have UL approved panels. And we're doing all the coding and programming and building all the algorithms to run these products at sometimes really high speeds. So if you think about acoustical ceiling tiles going down from an office building, going down a line, being produced at 80 pieces a minute.
Wow.
Or a wood eye joist that's coming together, and the wood eye joist is somewhere 60 to 80 feet long, and it's being produced at almost 1,000 feet per minute. Well, those are things that we could never do without the automation that we have today. Right. We could talk about some of the machine learning and AI, because everybody wants to know how that fits in, and it definitely does. But the real tools that we've really grown up with is like the 3D engineering, which you saw when we were doing a tour with our engineers, to be able to model it up, fit it all into a space in an existing mill, do a 3D walkthrough or a fly-through even with a headset if you wanted to, and see how everything fits together and runs, and time studies prior to even cutting any of the steel. So the technology for us starts before we even start designing the equipment. From the sales end, we're using that technology to look at a line and design a line concept, how we're going to fit it in, how we're going to get the material in and out. And then we're using that same software to design the details. We're downloading those 3D models to CNC machines that are cutting, either burning the steel or machining the steel or aluminum. Then we're putting it all together, testing it in our facilities, and we have our teams that go around the world to start up this equipment and debug it, train the operators, train the maintenance people on how to run it. And we're not talking about real basic equipment. We're talking about very customized for their application.
Sure.
and their location. And so there's a lot of R&D that goes into it as you're building these lines. So full engineering staff of people that can do all kinds of code and test these systems. It's pretty amazing, the technology that's involved.
Yeah, I want to come back to a couple things you just mentioned, but let's start with your team, because you've talked about the variety of engineering. You need sales and design. Obviously, then the skilled technician and tradesman you need to build and produce these. Smart people who can figure out the logistics. I imagine you're probably importing some materials, so you've got to think about, again, have smart people who can think about supply chains.
Right.
That's a pretty diverse workforce. Tell us a little more about them. How many employees do you have? And I also know you have a really cool partnership there locally to help educate and train the next generation. So why don't you talk about the team and that program a little bit?
Sure. Well, starting with the team, about 120 folks, mostly in Roseburg, Oregon. Some of them remote, but still in Oregon. And the cool thing about what we do on the manufacturing side, and I talk about manufacturing a lot, mainly because my degree is in manufacturing management and my background. But
it's okay. We talk about manufacturing a lot too.
Yeah, we love manufacturing. We love manufacturing jobs. We're like bringing in dollars to a local economy, that those dollars are coming from elsewhere. So we're not just exchanging dollars. That's huge for us in Roseburg. But as far as the team goes, it's one of the few businesses where you see the full spectrum of people. So you have accounting and HR and personnel and sales, and our sales is technical sales. So they're not your typical sales guys. They're all, for the most part, engineers of some sort: construction engineers, manufacturing engineers, mechanical engineers. And so it's a technical sales. Then, of course, we have electrical engineers, controls engineers, manufacturing engineers. Then we have all the production planning and control and supply chain management and inventory control and all those things that go along with supporting the manufacturing side. Machinists, fabricators, electricians, technicians for hydraulics, technicians for pneumatics, technicians for electrical techs, and assembly techs. So we have, from a basic trades side, basically starting right out of high school, or maybe even in high school, with like an apprenticeship or job shadowing, all the way up through journeymen that have been there for a long time and have journeyman cards, right? So, so it's one of those businesses where you see the full spectrum. So we also have the full training spectrum as well, right? So we do have a lot of professional engineers that were, OIT and Oregon State grads, right? The cool thing about in Roseburg is UCC, Umpqua Community College, that we work with a lot, has an engineering transfer program. So a lot of our folks grew up in Roseburg or Southern Oregon, went to UCC for a 2-year pre-engineering program, and then transferred to Oregon State or OIT, and then moved back to Roseburg. And in some cases, they worked for us in high school or during summer vacations in college to make money for college and come back, but they worked as interns. And so we do a lot of internships when we can. Business a little slow right now, so not as many this year, but typically in the summer we have multiple interns. So the one thing for the college-bound folks is that we see, or engineering especially, what we try to do is we try to get them in at the junior high and high school level for tours. So we do a lot of educational tours. Our main goal there is really to show them that there are great jobs, a whole variety of great jobs in Roseburg, Oregon. And they don't have to leave town to get a good job. If they want to leave town and get a degree, there's a great place to come back and raise a family, and there are great careers here for that. So we like to show them young and talk about what it takes to have a position in engineering or a position as a machinist or a fabricator, and so that they see those career paths, because not everybody gets exposed to manufacturing growing up unless maybe your parents were involved in manufacturing. So we start with that exposure. We support some robotics teams, and so we had tours, even grade school tours with the Lego robotics coming in with tours, which is awesome.
Oh, that's great.
But we also, so we work with the college for sure on numerous programs. They're pre-engineering, their apprenticeship programs that they run with the state for the trades, and then we also help with a new program that they have. It's called a mechatronics program, and so we're involved with their advisory group, and we just helped with the fundraising to remodel a building to make an advanced manufacturing hub on campus, and so we're really proud of that. And when we talk about robots, maybe here a little bit later, I can tell you more about that. But we also work with the high schools and the CTE programs around. So a number of the manufacturing folks are involved, especially our operations manager, working with like Southern High School, Douglas High School, Glide High School with their shop classes and FAA classes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so we work with them and give them sometimes projects to do where we'll donate steel and we'll give them plans. They'll fabricate up some jigs or some sawhorses that we need for the shop, and then we pay them for that for one of their fundraisers. But they get real life experience from our blueprints and our drawings and models. And then we inspect them and we give them a tour and tell them, what they could do if they wanted to work in these different positions. So that's been really great that we're working with the local kids on especially the trades. That's one of the things that we're very strong on.
Yeah, no, it's great. And you could see the commitment that the team members had to the company just walking around too. So it obviously comes back in spades for you. Okay, you mentioned it. So let's talk robots. They are part of today's manufacturing environment. And one of the things we find ourselves in conversation about a lot is, just because you've added a robot to a manufacturing process, doesn't mean you've taken away a job. In fact, often it's the opposite. You've increased capacity to have other jobs, or you need someone to work that robot. So there's sort of this automatic assumption, but it's a lot more than that. Talk a little bit about, again, how you guys use robots. I know there's a separate company that was formed that's related in the robotics space. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So we've been doing industrial robotics for about 16 years. And that was for our primary customers, maybe moving some plywood or feeding some secondary processing machines. And so we've been doing that for a number of years. And in 2019, we decided to spin it off as a separate division. And the reason we did that was that, it needed its own brand because we were going into other things other than big plywood and OSB, which Con-Vey has a 80-year history of, and a big brand of heavy duty. And we wanted to be able to go into other areas like some secondary wood, furniture, but also ag and packaging. So we came up with a company. We developed a plan, and that company is called 7 Robotics. So it's the number 7 and then robotics. And great YouTube videos, by the way, if you want to check out either Con-Vey or 7 Robotics on YouTube.
I can vouch for that.
They're pretty cool. So so we started this group. We started it in 2019 and took a little bit get going. So we were really running hard, ready to rock and roll in March of 2020, right as COVID hit. So it took a little longer to get started than we expected. But it's a great team. There's roughly 10 employees. They're all robotic technician types, and they build robotic systems for things like we have a client that does architectural grids for big buildings, and they were putting them together by hand, basically drilling and screwing them. And so we built a robot that can do that because they had a hard time finding people that could do that repetitively, accurately, without injury. And so you take that application and you make it where you still have the same technician, but they're loading parts into a jig, they're doing the QC, and the robot's doing the hard stuff, right? The dangerous work, the dirty work, the repetitive motion, heavy lifting. You have the robot do all that, and you still have this operator running it. Well, then the quality is actually more consistent.
Sure.
The production is more consistent because you're not getting tired at the end of the day and worn out from using a nail gun or a screwdriver or whatever it is, a drill. And so the idea is that the robot can be more consistent in output as well, working with a person.
Yeah.
In other cases, there may not be somebody involved with loading a jig because it's just the fact that it's a dangerous application or it's really heavy, and the robot does all the work, and we have a technician maybe that's watching a few robots work. And the reality of it now is that we're moving wood so much faster, and it's dangerous splinters or hand injuries or repetitive motion, and it's dirty environment. Not everybody wants to work in that environment, and so it's hard to find people that want to do that job for 8 to 10 hours a day and not get hurt. So the robots really kind of fill a niche for not saving labor. Everybody thinks, if we're building robots, we're saving labor. That's not the goal at all. The goal is we can't get enough labor to do the job, so we're basically constrained by labor resources in a lot of our areas. And so by having this, you can take the labor you have, produce more safely and faster, more consistent.
Yeah, and I think that's again why I find the space that you sit in so interesting as a company, because your folks are called upon to help build a solution for a company that can increase productivity, but also this is an important piece of it: increase safety and also ultimately worker retention and the ability for workers to do different things and have key roles in that. But again, backing out and improving safety issues and productivity are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's really cool. So are your folks, does a company call you and say, here's what we want, do it? Or do they call and say, here's where we want to go, we don't know what we need or want to get there, help us figure that out? Or both?
Yeah, both, definitely. And it depends. So sometimes we're talking about a new product that's, coming to the market that maybe has never been done before.
Oh, okay.
And so they're saying, this is a value add product that we want to do. They have a sales plan. They think they can sell this much of it in the first, 10 years or whatever their business plan looks like. And so they're like, this is how much we need to produce per year or per month, per day. And
how do we do
this
it?
is the process. And yeah, exactly. And we help them with that, sometimes with some R&D and some testing. Maybe they'll put together a team of some if there's glue involved or something, they'll bring chemists involved. But we're the machine builder guys that help them actually make the process happen, right? So new product development, we start doing samples and do our engineering and come up, and we work very collaboratively with our customer on that. Sometimes they'll have a content person that really knows, they're the guy for this type of thing, or they're the chemist, or they're the technical advisor, and our engineering will work with them to develop a line. Other times it may be that they've been producing this product for years and years, and their plant is outdated, and they're wanting to upgrade or do a new plant, and so they have a whole design and kind of concept layout, and they're like, here's what we want to build, here's our specification, and then we go through it, and a lot of times we work with them to fine tune that. So they might have the basics, but it might take a year and a half to go through and back and forth with design concepts. Like if you were building a new mansion, because these aren't cheap lines.
So there's a big if at the start of that clause.
Right. It's not something you design quickly and easily. So it's custom, and that's the way our equipment is. We're not building catalog items.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is the moment where I do one of my obligatory digressions into policy, because it is what we do at OBI. But I promise I didn't go into this interview planning to talk about things like bonus depreciation or an R&D tax credit, which most other states have and Oregon does not. And the bonus depreciation is a timely conversation because Oregon just chose to disconnect from an accelerated opportunity there from the federal government, which is going to cost manufacturers and other capital-intensive companies hundreds of millions of dollars, not overall, but in timing.
Right.
And I won't go into tax policy here, but I would just love for you to talk quickly about why some of those incentives, and again, bonus depreciation doesn't change what you send the state ultimately at the end of the day. It changes when you send it to the state. Why are those types of tax structures so important in a business like yours, but also the businesses that you're serving?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. And you're right. Con-Vey and our clients both love R&D tax credits and bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation, especially smaller businesses like ours, right? I mean, we're a small business. So R&D tax credits, because a lot of what we do is R&D, great from the federal side, not so great from the state side, right? We're not able to take any advantage of that. So it's been wonderful to have the R&D tax credits on the federal side and the bonus depreciation. Because what that means is that is more money that can go back. Again, we're a small company, so majority of our money is going back into the business.
That's right.
It's allowing us to grow and provide more jobs. And so by doing that in a timely manner, right, like being able to depreciate that off faster instead of over 3 years or 5 years for something that may be worn out in 3 years or outdated technology-wise in 3 years, and we're depreciating it over 5. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. But
Right.
there's unfortunately a lot of people setting policy on these issues who don't actually work in these spaces.
Right.
So there's a disconnect there, no pun intended, on the application of something like you just said.
Don't even get me started on the cat tax. That was definitely put together by somebody that's never run a business and never seen margins. But
okay, I will not get you started on it.
Okay.
But I also will not edit that out. Well, so just since we're in this space, because I took us here, what is it like to do business in Oregon? I mean, I mean both the good and the bad. There are a lot of great things about being here. We'll talk about the commitment to the community in a second, but what is it like to do business here, and what can we do to help policymakers understand what you need as a small manufacturing company in rural Oregon?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a number of years ago, we were looking at our growth potential, and we had some pretty strong growth plans, and of course, a lot of states come to guys like us and say, hey, you should move to Texas or Alabama or Mississippi or even Nevada, because we'll give you this land that's already set up with infrastructure to build on, right?
And they just come to you with that.
Oh, Constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, we get calls or emails, and that's quite a big thing. So, or they're at trade shows and
Sure.
have booths,
Sure.
saying, "Hey, move to someplace in Tennessee or something." And we looked at growth. We looked at those things. We looked at growth in Louisiana, Texas, Alabama primarily, and great people, great places to work. Some of the same struggles workforce-wise for us. But it all boiled down to the fact that majority of us are Oregonians, and a lot of us are from Southern Oregon, and we all love living here. And we all love the activities that we do here, the things we do outside, the climate, all the things that Oregon has to offer. Majority of us, our families grew up as logging families, and so we live in the woods, and we understand the woods, and we love the timber industry, especially in Southern Oregon and Roseburg. So most of us have ties to that industry and really appreciate where we live because of that. But how it is to do business in Oregon? Challenging, right? It's the easy answer is, oh yeah, the taxes and regulation, and that's definitely a big thing. But I look at it and I say, I think there's an overarching thing, an umbrella effect over those things, that those things are just part of the problem, and it's a cultural problem that we really don't want businesses in Oregon. That's the feeling that we have as business owners and manufacturers, is they really don't want us here. They don't want us manufacturing here, where those other states I mentioned want manufacturing jobs, are courting us to go there, where Oregon's pretty much saying, you just guys can leave if you want. We really don't want you. And we get that every step of the way. Policies and regulations are huge for us. So, yeah, is that an answer for you?
Yeah. We won't bring this down too much with a bunch of specifics, but we'll talk offline, because
we would love to feel the love.
Well, I think you bring up something important, which is this is a story of a company that did choose to stay here and not go, and that's important, and we are grateful for that, and more people should recognize that and express that gratitude. But that's not going to last, or it's not going to sustain forever.
No, it's harder and harder to keep that.
Yeah, I was going to say, passion gets you a long way in wanting to stay in, here and work, but it may not be the answer forever.
And we may not be able to continue to grow here, right? I mean, it's one thing to be here, but it's like you see a lot of companies, it's like, well, when you get to a certain size, a certain thing, it makes sense maybe to have another facility, and we would rather not have another facility. But if things keep happening in Oregon, then that other facility will be somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, one last quick question for you. You express the passion that many of you have for the region, for the state, the community that you're in. But tell us a little bit about how Con-Vey likes to give back to Roseburg, and what the town has meant to you.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, when we look at businesses, and the biggest thing that we can do, it's not the donation to a sports team or a cheerleading squad, which we do, obviously, but that's not the biggest thing we do. The biggest thing is we spend over $13 million in the local economy for wages and benefits. And I'm not talking about small wages, and I'm not talking about chintzy benefits. I'm talking about great benefits. And unfortunately, in Douglas County, there's not a lot of that. And so we're very proud of that. We're very proud that we pay well. We grow people within our company so that they can thrive and move up in the company. We want them to thrive and their families to thrive, right? So that's, to me, the biggest thing. In addition to that, we definitely, with the trades and some of the skills building and things we do there, we definitely want to be involved in that. We help out with the schools and the programs, and the Recruit Hippo with helping us with some students, and which is a great program, and we're very supportive of all those programs where we can bring students in. We sponsor a lot of the Boys and Girls Club, the robotic teams, and all those things that you want to do as a good employer in the area, as well as we're very involved in the Umpqua Partnership for Economic Development and their pitch night, which they have pitch nights kind of like a Shark Tank, and they do it 3 times a year. Last one had 175 people in the audience or so.
That's great. Yeah.
And so we try to be involved in those things because we like the idea of entrepreneurs and people starting their businesses, and if we can help support those other local businesses, we will.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those things we try to get involved in things that are happening in the community that'll help grow the community, not just because we live there and we love it, but selfishly we want to be able to attract good, talented people. We hire people from out of state quite a bit. We hire people from Texas A&M and Idaho State and different places. And so we want to attract them to our town. So it's selfish too. We want a cool town to live in.
Well, you've got one. I think you've got one personally. So.
Thank you.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time, although we could chat for a long time about the work that you guys are doing. It's terrific and interesting. And folks, I do encourage you to go online. They have a great social media presence between the videos, and you can like and follow them. Where can people go to get more information about Con-Vey?
Yeah, I think social media is a great way to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and obviously our YouTube videos. But Con-Vey.com is the website, is con-vey.com, or our robotics division is 7 robotics with an S.com.
Great. Okay, go check them out, listeners. Dave, thank you for joining us today, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. The Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber, and our episodes, of course, can be found on all of your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Please follow and share. And for more information about OBI, visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.